We're back. Season 9, Episode 4, Sparkle 7. That was a quick week. This is the heist episode, the 200th episode. What else do I need to say? So, now, I was thinking about how to rate this episode. Usually I like to wait till the end of the episode to rate it. But I'm afraid that per the rules, which I actually double-checked here. Hang on just a second. Yep, here we go. Paragraph 13, Section 5. The presence of Zephyr Breeze automatically makes any episode a lamentation. So, we're just going to rate this episode black and move on. I suppose we should at least talk about it. Poor Starlight. Anyways, so they have competing siblings, and they competed back in the day, and everything's all compete-y. I wonder how common that is. One of the things I've said many times is that there's nothing actually there's something good about healthy competition. It's something that I have said a few thousand million billion trillion times. So I'm actually kind of with this. They even have a line where the parents were specifically giving them golden stars to keep things friendly rather than letting it be things. And by the way, yeah, that reminds me. Several people, as recently as a couple days ago, were like, "Oh, he's gonna flip out when he sees the writers." And you all are saying, "How do we credit this episode?" So before I go any forwards, what's the issue exactly? Like, what did I miss about that? What makes this episode unusual for credit? It's written by the voice actors. That is not something that I was aware of. Hang on. Look up my other source on this. Because the source I had said that it was written by Nicole and Josh. Which this source also says that. Oh, I see why. Got it. So, I don't care about story by. So, Nicole and Josh it is. Now, I can actually explain why I don't care about story by if you want to. Because that's a problem I've encountered a long time ago. So, for those of you who haven't actually seen any of my Star Trek stuff, I know, one of these days I'll stop referencing Star Trek when it comes to MLP. Probably when MLP is over. There's a concept over in Hollywood that sucks. It's the simplest and easiest way to put this. It's actually really frustrating for me personally, but also professionally. So the way it boils down, I'll go ahead and go into this because this is a valid topic to talk about. Hollywood has a thing where they don't really, like, they have their own rules and regulations, but they don't really care who they credit when it comes to episodes. So there's written by and there's story by, but neither of those are generic terms, believe it or not. Now, I tend to usually follow what looks like the actual writer of an episode, but even that's a judgment call because it's not always necessarily that person. So most shows, including this one, I have run into this a few times on this show, but especially Star Trek, have a thing where someone will say, I have a story idea, or I put forth a script, and they're the ones who get credit because that's how union rules work. However, the actual episode that goes to script, that goes on the screen, was not written by that person. In fact, not even the bare bones of that was actually on the screen, right? I'm not going to give you specific examples because I don't remember any off the top of my head. But one of the things that tends to happen is, for example, let's say that Ross says, "Hey, Lore, I have an idea of an episode for the Extant. It's going to involve Janeway and Voyager magically showing up and being like, oh my gosh, where are we? And the Empire helps them out and sends them back home, and they get home early." Okay, there you go. There's the episode idea. So then I take that idea and I write, this is an episode by Ross, and that's what we'll actually show in the episode. However, the actual episode is about how there's this. Let me think about this for a moment. There's a ship that's been mining for a while, and this mining ship ends up getting lost in the asteroid field and has to use this last-minute technique in order to be able to find its way out and trigger the stars in order to get the pathway necessary to warp out and get back home just in time for, some big event that's happening. And you notice those two stories just barely have any bare-bones connection to each other. But in Hollywood, Ross would get the story by credit, and sometimes get the screenplay and written by credit. You've probably heard of this term. It's called the uncredited rewrite. And it's extremely common, and like I said, it's extremely frustrating. So it's always a bit of a judgment call who wrote what and where, right? Now, on a show like MLP, I've only run into that problem like maybe 5 or 6 times, unlike on Star Trek, where it's a near non-stop problem. So, that is something to be thrown in there. But I just wanted to mention it because you brought up the topic. Now, if you want, we can add another thing for them into the spreadsheet, but I'm only going to add one column for that. So we'll go ahead and do that as a compromise. The voice actors. Ta-da. Done. I have no idea how involved they were in the writing of this episode, and I don't care. Moving on. I mean, I do care, but I don't know a way of knowing that, because I don't have infinite power. I'm not Q yet, or will be Q, whatever, time. So, competing sibling rivalry, keeping things friendly, everything's cool. And then we see, right at the beginning, that Spike was competing with them. He was doing the little gold stars on the wall. What's funny is this show has a really common tendency to show and then tell. But I bring that up because this is a weird example of it, because it shows him, and then literally 5 seconds later he flat out says, I always wanted to be Sibling Supreme someday. So we can already see where the episode's going. And then Starlight is left running the school by herself. So, with the return of Sombra, we thought we would shore up our defenses. So I'm going to pause for a moment here. Don't mistake me, I like this episode, but let's talk about this for a second. So first of all, it's a little late. Second of all, Celestia and Luna are still bickering over this, which actually that makes a degree of sense. In fact, one of the things I like about this episode is that the rivalry between Luna and Celestia is not resolved at the end of the episode. Instead, they are still aggravated at each other and still wandering over to go and, argue about it, which that makes sense because they do disagree on this matter. Allow me to go ahead and say that based on speculation and based on analysis, I'm pretty sure that this whole thing is Celestia's idea. The reason why I'm pretty sure about that is because this is a friendship lesson and a lesson in teamwork and helping out her favorite pupil and her favorite captain of the guard playing a game. This is not increasing the defenses of the castle. No, really. This is not increasing the castle's defenses. So, some of you may or may not know, I've actually worked in security before. Mostly cyber security, internet security, that kind of thing. But also physical security, right? So let me talk about that for a second, because what happens is they're like, he goes down the list of explaining what all of the security. Listen, I'm not saying I'm the Borg. All the Borg. But, because that's how that works, right? It's all just a hive mind. No, they go down the list showing everything. No, hang on. Let's pause for a moment and rewind, because Twilight's forever was legit. Let's just go ahead and the animation in the facial expressions, the postures in this episode are so good. This is actually the best animation I've seen in this show. This might actually be the peak. I don't know if it'll be better than this. I can't even explain it properly because there are so many tiny, minuscule, nuanced details. It would probably take me like 40 minutes of just going through, like, see this, and this, and this, and this. It's good. Moving on. Yeah, all the faces, there's even little tidbits about how they stand and pose, and they just kind of move around. Like even their posture isn't standard. It's hard to explain, but you know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. You may or may not even have processed it, but it's absolutely there, and it's so good. There's another thing that's good about this episode, too. We'll get there in just a moment. So what happens is Shining Armor starts going down the list and talking about how this is going to be the security. The moment he starts talking about this, I'm like, okay, it's a heist episode. Now, that's good. I actually really enjoy a good heist story. In fact, I'm actually a huge fan of Ocean's 11. The newer one, not the older one. The older one's kind of boring. Yes, I have seen it. I tend to like older films in general. That's not one of them. But still, I do tend to like heist stories in general, and they tend to be some of my favorite little tidbits. So yeah, going down the list and explaining the security makes sense. You gotta explain the obstacles that they have to overcome. Now, I've talked about heist stories before in fiction. A few times. It's come up in some movies I've covered, and it's come up in some shows I've covered, and a couple of games where you have like a heist mission in a game, like a quest or whatever. So there's a couple of ways to do this structurally, but it always starts with explaining the obstacles. Then there's two broad paths you can take. One is to show the audience nothing and instead just kind of have them come along as things happen. The other is to explain the plan so that we know what's supposed to happen, and thus we then know how things are going wrong when things go wrong. So these two things make a very different and very contrasting style of approach, but it always begins with explaining the security. Right? Yeah, Home Alone, in Deep Space Nine, we've got Bada Bing, Bada Bang is a good example of this type of thing. The aforementioned Ocean's 11 actually shows us part of what's going along. Because, yeah, Ocean's 11 is a unique one in that they bother to show all of the plan except for the part of the plan that only like 3 people even knew about. Now, I'm not going to spoil, but you get the point, right? And yeah, Sword of Kalis is another good example of this. You get the idea. So that's the structure. So we start to explain the security. Now, Star Swirl using pieces of Chrysalis's throne as an enchantment thing is actually brilliant in its own right. That's something that's such a cool idea that, frankly, I wish they did more with that, but let's move on. By the way, this is a continuity cavalcade, this episode, so I just wanted to mention that really quick. Anyways, then they talk about their sealing in the tunnels, okay. They're putting in the fans, okay. They're doubling up the security, okay. The doors are only open via metals, and there's a floor trap, and then there's geese, okay. Now, this is obviously a heist. So let's discuss the heist first. Let's discuss the security second. So the heist. By designing the heist in this way, I swear that Shining Armor did this on purpose. He has specifically designed each obstacle with one of the main 6 in mind. The geese are obviously Fluttershy. The sealed in is obviously Applejack. The people, the extra guards are obviously Rarity. And the flight thing is obviously Rainbow. You get the idea, right? Each of these is specifically an obstacle designed to counter-effect everyone except for the specialist who can get through it, right? Teamwork, you get it. You don't do a heist with one person. That's boring. You do a heist with a team. They all work together. You get the concept, right? So, it's all set up. We've got everything lined up. And we've got all of those pieces. So that's cool. And this will show up later. But before I move forwards... Yeah, he is tunneling twice. First of all, no one accounts for Spike. Second of all, even though Celestia is joking, he absolutely does not accommodate for any internal interaction, someone preventing the security from working from within. It is very easy to subvert the security internally, as is actually shown, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about this from a security perspective, just real quick. I swear I'll only bore you for a little bit on this. Security needs to take into account 3 things, okay? The passerby, the determined, and the everyday, okay? So the overwhelming majority of security, probably close to 99% of security that exists in the world, both digital and analog, all exists for the passerby. You don't wander into someone's house because that door is locked, and you know it's locked because everyone locks their doors. You don't try to just hop into someone's random car because not only does it have a lock on the door, but you don't have the key. That's passerby security, if that makes any sense. And that is the overwhelming majority of security is designed primarily with that in mind. You are dissuading someone from casually breaking in. Make sense? So, we got that. Then we move on to the determined. Now, here's the thing. One of the great truths of designing security is that someone sufficiently determined will break in. So what you have to do is you have to make it as punishing and costly as possible to dissuade additional layers of determination. Someone who wants to break in will probably not if there's some barbed wire. Someone who really wants to break in will probably not if there's barbed wire and electric fence. Someone who really, really wants to break in, and you get the idea, right? That's the concept. You add layers which make it harder and harder and harder to break in, but you always have to decide how far you push that, because there is a point of diminishing returns, because no matter how many layers you add, if there is someone who is truly determined, they are going to break in. That is a truth of security. And that's true with analog as well as digital. Make sense? So, you make it difficult for someone determined. Okay. Now I'm going to pause for a moment. So most of the security he made works for the passerby. In fact, it's a little bit completely overkill for the passerby, because most of the security he built was for the determined. The thing is, his security doesn't really up the cost for the determined, if you paid attention to that. It doesn't really take much more than a team to get through, if they are determined to do so, which obviously they are, because he himself is dangling the prize. Now, again, this is more for the heist and the security, as I've already mentioned, but the reason I bring this all up is an evil group who is working together right now, cough, cough, or another evil force who actually wants to do this is going to be just as determined. And they're not going to be any more dissuaded by any of the obstacles he's put in than they are. So this is really, like if we're going with the layer thing, we've got the passerby layer. This is probably only one additional layer on top of that. So already this is a failed security feature. Hang on, it gets worse. Because the last thing you have to keep in mind is the everyday. And now this is an aspect most people don't talk about when it comes to security. It is also the hardest thing to design for, and it is something that is critically important. It is, in my opinion, the most important aspect of security design, both digital and analog. You have to design it for the everyday person. The person who's walking through there, who goes into that office every day, who drives your car to work every day, who logs into a website every day. You need to think about that concept. You need to think about that, and you need to design around that. One of the simplest ideas, just to name one specific example, is let's say you've got a security door that only opens from a digital lock that opens or closes it. How do you... So that's a good passerby security. But in order for it to work for the everyday, what you do is you make opening that door very quick and very easy. Quick badge, boom, it's open, done. No issues. It needs to be super easy, barely an inconvenience, to be able to effectively bypass that security for people who work there every day. Now, pay attention to all the stupid things that he just did for this freaking castle, and you will see why this is 100% unfeasible and untenable for the everyday concept, for everyday work. What's funny is the episode acknowledges this just once, but it does actually acknowledge this once. Because there's a scene where the geese all go off, right? Because Spike and Fluttershy walked in, and they fall into the pet trap. And then Luna glances at it and says, hey, your geese had she emphasizes another false alarm. She rolls her eyes and goes back. So the episode actually does quickly acknowledge how stupid this concept is from the everyday perspective. So credit where credit is due. So anyway, sorry for that little thing. Yeah, Luna was in on it, to be fair, but I stand by my statement. I do think that is the writing actually, yes, I have, acknowledging how terrible the security processes are. But again, that's not the point. The point is that this is a thing for the heist. Now, forgive me for pausing to talk about this one more additional second. This is why I agree with Luna. So this is all interpretation based on speculation. But from what I see in the episode, Luna thinks they should up their security, and Celestia thinks they should make this look good in public, offer to have this little game between her favorite student and her favorite night captain, It's not actually upping the security, it's just making it look better and helping out friendship. A very Celestia idea. But Luna is probably thinking a little bit more practically, as she usually does. A little more, ironically, tangibly. So Luna thinks they should actually increase their security. Hence the disagreement. I just mentioned this because while all of the obvious stuff is going on, while all of the obvious heist and character and great stuff is going on, there's still underneath this a legitimately good plot in the background. And again, it stays unresolved by the end of the episode. So, credit where credit is due. If I was to say, by the way, I would say that that's a little bit of Josh Haber's fingerprints on this little side plot. Even though it informs the main plot, it's not really part of what's going on, which is why I wanted to talk about it so much. Anyways, so... yeah, getting Lord Derma. So, Twilight does the whole meme thing. I forget what that's from. All the figures and formulas are going off. Okay. And yet another great transition. I'm just going to pause one more moment to mention that the transition is so good. The transition is so good. And there's so many good transitions between scenes in this episode. Anyways. So they start talking about teamwork. Each of you focus on a specific obstacle. I actually already mentioned all this, so I'm just going to move on through my notes here. Then Shining Armor naturally guesses the entire plan, because of course he does. He literally built it for that. as we already mentioned, he effectively designed the plot to tunnel her into a specific path forwards. Anywho, then Rarity shows up and says, unless, and that's my second favorite expression of the episode, and this is when Rarity starts to completely steal the show. I'm sorry, I know I've been gushing about Tabitha St. Germain for like the last year. She is so good. So, she gives this big speech about how we will do the unexpected, and Were you practicing that speech? A little bit. I was practicing. Does it sound like I was rushed? It was a little rushed, you know. I don't know. When did we start the MLP stuff? I actually don't remember. Whenever we started the MLP stuff, whenever we proved the Streaminations format. So, this is in my notes right here. What I say is, I absolutely love these expressions. Gosh, gosh. Anyways, yeah, it's only been a year. What, Ross? Yes, this is going to be a black episode, and we'll get to why in a minute. So, then we have the black and white section with Rarity and Rainbow, which is amazing. And then Pinky jumps in, fully colored, and interrupts. And then Pinky's section is done in like really highly bloomed, like crayon drawing. Not quite crayon, but it's kind of leaning that way. But then we get to AJ's, Applejack's, which is all kind of old-timey, even with the little noise crackle in the background. So, just, oh my god. The visual storytelling is just astonishingly good. Now, what's really interesting here, this is funny. So, Applejack apparently had a country music personality back in the day, which she hung up to be with her family. Now, based on what we see and show, that doesn't contradict anything that I'm aware of in continuity. First of all, Applejack did actually used to sing, kinda. She has a little bit of a backstory in music, and of course she used to be friends with, I forget her name, the singer that they brought in for that one episode. And this was a while ago. So long ago, in fact, that it was probably before she really met most of the other members of the crew. This was back in the day, so to speak. Both the visuals and the audio do very much get across that kind of concept. So, yeah, Applejack also did live in Manhattan, although that was earlier than this. My reason for bringing all this up is it actually, yeah, but I meant her, Ra-Ra, that was her name, Ra-Ra. My reason for bringing all this up is nothing that is said actually contradicts continuity. It is entirely possible and reasonable that AJ really did serve as a country music star for a brief stint in her career, and then gave it up to be with her family. Nothing that is said in that, either timeline-wise, character-wise, or just logic-wise, contradicts anything. So the whole time, I'm writing down those notes. And then it says, did that actually happen or you just make that up? And Applejack, is, of course, is like, and then it moves on because that's the gag. I'm only mentioning this because it actually makes perfect sense to me that that actually did happen. Moving on. So, naturally, Spike and Fluttershy do the Mission Impossible thing with completely over-the-top visual effects, which literally don't seem to fit with the style of the cartoon. Did you notice that? That they were using non-standard animation for, like, the visual effects of the explosion to contrast the Flash animation. Just kind of a nice little tidbit there. Anyways, so they Mission Impossible thing, and once again, that is yet another visual style for showing off each of these little stories. So then, they go ahead and go forwards with standard operation. Apple Core is noticed immediately. I love the patched-together outfits that Fluttershy and Spike have. It's not quite what they had in the Vision, but it's kind of near there. And of course, Pinky has a fishbowl instead of an actual space helmet because of course she does. So they're going through. The balloon bursts because of course it does, and then Pinkie Pie spits so much in her fishbowl that it's just sloshing around her neck, which is making me grossed out just saying this. We're going to move on immediately. This then leads to Rarity and Rainbow trying to go to the, and I quote, seedy juice joint, which is always closed about this time because that's how hours work. Yeah. This also leads to one of my favorite personal gags in the whole episode, which is funny because it's right before the bad thing. Because Rarity grabs the guy's like, yeah, how are we going to rough someone up for get information? And he doesn't react. He's just like, oh, it's just what kind of information you need. He's so polite the whole time. Oh, yeah. How do we find where the secret is? Oh, there's a secret entrance right over there. Oh, well, thank you very much. And she, like, puts his tie back and readjusts his outfit. This then leads to Luna bringing in Zephyr Breeze. So, this is when the episode loses me. because this is now officially a negative to everything. So this is obviously a lamentation episode. Probably Imperial Star Destroyer. So Zephyr Breeze is there, and he's just as irritating as he usually is, but not to the, I will admit, not to the legitimately sociopathic extent that, or to the, that's the wrong word, to the narcissistic extent that he used to be. I mentioned that because part of what bothered me so much about Zephyr Breeze was he was so narcissistic and so over the top that I couldn't just get by it and look at the rest of the episode. It was in a non-stop glare. It's like saying, don't you like this wonderful piece of artwork? And someone's shining a halogen beam in my eyes the entire time. Like, I can't get past the halogen beam. I don't care how good the episode is. I can't see it because there's this right in my face. Yeah, the Destroying the Dad's Cloud Collection was such a just over-the-top, ridiculous, frankly evil kind of an act. So he's not that way here. He is merely a narcissistic jackass here. So, I'll give you that episode. You made him less horrifically terrifying. But, yeah, no. So, Luna obviously did bring Zephyr, and actually mentioned specifically that Luna brought him in. Luna brought him in order to make the job easier. Also, we know Spike sabotaged the balloon. What's funny is, at the time, it didn't even occur to me to question why the balloon popped, because I assumed she just went too high. We find out later that Spike actually popped the balloon, so that's actually a bit of good writing as well, that they don't mention what happened, they just mention that it happened, and everyone just moves on from it. There's a lot of actual hints about what's going on with the Spike and Luna story throughout the episode, so more good writing. Anyway, so there's Zephyr. I'm gonna kill him. Moving on. Rainbow looks actually kind of awful, to be completely honest, but that's neither here nor there. So then they're there. Okay, cool. They're in. Meanwhile, they have to glide to the throne, no flapping, which actually sounds like a cool mission idea in a video game. And then they plummet down to the pit. Another false alarm from the geese. Yeah. More great visuals, as there always are. We see an acknowledgement of Fluttershy having issues ever since she lost Aunt Angel all the way back in Castlemania. Yep. And then we see Spike wanting to be the younger sibling. Now, the episode has already made it very clear what's going on with Spike, but this just kind of hammers home how this isn't just some random thing. This is a legitimate emotional need for him. We'll come back to that in just a moment. This then leads to probably the actual funniest scene in the episode, where Rainbow and Rarity are arguing after having opened the path for Fluttershy and Spike. They walk out, and Rarity's in the middle of it. Oh, you don't understand. It's not worth the risk. Hello, Spike. And then, if you don't understand, even if we make it past the gut... Wait a second. The way she says it, the way she goes from neutral to 10 to neutral, just like that, is brilliant. So they all failed. I'm going to pause for a moment. Up until this moment, the episode hasn't actually done anything to lose me. There's one scene that bothers me this entire episode. Just the one. Not even the Zephyr Breeze thing. Just the one. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me, Triaxia, wouldn't you? And this one thing that bothers me is Spike gives a pep-up talk to Twilight. And Twilight says, oh, thank you, Spike. And Spike says, what are... Hang on, I wrote it down. What are little brothers for? And then Spike goes for a hug. And then Twilight ignores him. Now, I know. She's in the moment. But that bothered me. That actually bothered me. Especially since an earlier episode back in Season 8, which was actually a crap episode, if I might be so bold, Father Knows Beast is the name of the episode, did a better job of emphasizing how much Twilight really does care and love about Spike than that one scene. Now, I get it. She's focused on the crown. It's just that really bugged me. It's a negative to story. Moving on. This then leads to... oh, by the way, Rarity... I forgot to mention that Rarity was really, really excited about dolling up Rainbow earlier. Anyways... oh, wow, I actually wrote in my notes negative to story. That's funny. Anyway, so then Zephyr is, terrible. And Maud shows up to help bucking through solid rock quick side note. I know I've talked about this 1,000 times. You notice how Maud has no dialogue here. This is the perfect example of how animation is arguably superior to live action. Because they don't need to bring in the voice actress if they're having budget issues or if they don't have access to the actress. None of that is necessary. They don't need to bring someone in and put them in makeup and have them stand there to do no lines of dialogue. They can just animate it. Done. Anyways, so they get in. Rarity gives a hoarse voice. Get it? And then the episode gets awesome for a few minutes. Because what happens is the same thing that tends to happen in most heist episodes. After the big reveal, you gotta explain it all. And you gotta show how it all connects. A good heist show, a good heist movie, a good heist game will show how things connect in a way that works, in a way that lines up with what we've already seen. This does this really well, because everything that Spike mentions about the plan is something that lines up perfectly with what we've already seen. All the pieces were there as we were going through it. But I do have to make a quick mention of the fact that Luna was literally sitting there like Blofeld, just petting the geese. Same angle, same dark angle, just it's not even played for laughs. It's just straight up. Anyways. So yeah, there's all the foreshadowing points and all the things that lead to Spike being the one to claim the crown, yada yada. And of course, this makes perfect sense. Spike naturally knows his older siblings well. They never even realized they were competing against Spike. As I've said many times before, the hardest type of game to win is when you don't realize you're playing. And of course, it makes perfect sense that Luna, who was not on board with this from the word go, would use this as a way to demonstrate her ideas and use this as leverage to try and get Celestia to actually talk with her and discuss with her about it, which she does. So the two go off to argue, and Twilight and Shining are left just kind of going, and Spike gets the crown. Yay. I mentioned in my notes here, about freaking time Spike gets this kind of recognition. Cut to credits, 200th episode, the end. So, obviously, this episode is black. I don't have much else to add to that. But if we were to pretend Zephyr Breeze wasn't in it, how do we rate this one? It is definitely a fun episode. And, all joking aside, there really is only one scene in the entire episode that bothers me, and I've already said it. Even the Zephyr stuff didn't actually bother me, it just made me want to slug him. I think this, I'm going to be honest, I think the floor on this is red. Because of the quality of the animation, because of the incredible voice acting, but more importantly, because of the writing. There are at least 3 examples of good writing in this episode that I've been bothering to point out as we go through. There's the incredible brilliance of the behind-the-scenes backstory security thing that I already mentioned. There's the brilliance of the Spike story, which is weaving throughout the entire narrative. And there's this general fun and presentation of the actual heist itself. All 3 of these things are very, very good. And all of them are just on a writing aspect. So, very well written in multiple different ways, in multiple different types. On top of fantastic animation, on top of brilliant cinematography, on top of excellent visuals. Just, the problem is, I feel like I don't quite have the oomph that's required for it to be purple. That's the one thing that kind of makes me go, Does that also mean the only episode that the voice actors wrote is a red? Unless they write some more later, who knows? Like, yeah, I can feel red on this pretty easily. Although, actually, I'm kind of curious of something. Where's Josh Haber? His track record is just hysterical. It really is. Like, I know, I'm staring at the spreadsheet right now, right? He hasn't written the most episodes yet. Megan McCarthy still holds that record. But Megan McCarthy's spread is all over the place. Lots of yellows, lots of oranges, blue, several greens. Josh Haber is the king of red. Like, if you look at his list, it's just red, yellow, red. They probably asked Triexia. I mean, that's a simple trade deal, if we're being honest with ourselves. Most notable writers? Well, obviously, Emery Larson is the king of violet, or the king of purple, whatever you want to call that. He has still, even the last episode he wrote was back in season 5, he still has the most purple episodes to him. Emery Larson nailed it so hard, so many times. Scrolling forward a little bit. Megan McCarthy is probably the prolific. Let's call her the Brennan Braga of this episode, because she's written some good stuff. She does put out a few violets, but yeah, she's the whole gamut. She's hit everything from blue all the way up to purple. Josh Haber is the king of red. Yeah. Scroll forward a little bit here. And there's a few other writers that jump out at me. You know, Dave Polsky was actually pretty good for a while there. Dave Polsky did write some pretty terrible episodes. He, in fact, has 2 blues under his belt. But he also has quite a few reds and a purple. They probably have a lesser effect, Trihexia. Scrolling forward a little bit here. We have the duo, Joanna Lewis and Christine Sonko. They actually have a really good record overall. 2 greens is as low as they've gone. Everything else they have is orange, red, or purple. Scroll forward a little bit. Nick Confalone is probably the average king. A lot of yellows in that one. And then Michael Vogel. Michael Vogel is another rainbow. Because, yeah, Vogel has a blue, a green, 2 yellows, 3 oranges, 5 reds, and 2 purples. So, yeah, he's another rainbow. And honestly, that's probably it as far as really... Oh, and Nicole DeBoo. Obviously, she's been... I don't know what to call her. The new kid on the block? She only started with Season 7, Episode 25. She's effectively new as of Season 8. And she has a blue. So... Vogel's blue, let me go back here, was The Cart Before the Ponies. Season 6, Episode 14. I don't remember what that episode is. Oh, yeah. Derby Racers. Go, go, go. Yeah, nope, that tracks. That episode, upon analysis, was much worse than I remembered. And that's why that one was a blue. Best one-off. Well, let's look here. Well, by sheer reality, if we only count writers who've written 1 episode... that would, by logical definition, be Brittany Jo Flores, who only will run episode, which is Season 7, Episode 22, Once Upon a Zeppelin, which is the Twilight and Family on the Zeppelin episode, which was much better than I thought it was when we went back through with analysis mode. Credit also to Noelle Benvenuti, who wrote Maud Pie and Made in Manhattan. It's 2 episodes, but still 2 very good ones. Now, the worst one-off episode is actually really easy. Kim Byer Johnson, who wrote 1 episode, Non-Compete Clause, which is a blow. Next week. All right, let's see. So what is next week? So I don't know anything, of course, but next week is going to be episode 5, which is The Point of No Return, and episode 6, Common Ground. I don't know what those are about because, as usual, I'm ignoring the descriptions, but that's what we're covering next week. For now, I got some work to do, so I'm going to go get some work done. See you around, everyone.